Hello, friends. This is Pastor Christopher Maronde of the Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture. It is a great joy to be with you in this new year. There's a lot of exciting things coming up for Lyra. We'll have a couple of videos coming out in the next couple of weeks that are going to talk about some very exciting things that are going on here for the future of the work that we're doing here and how you all can help us with that. So that's coming up in the next few weeks. I'll be recording a couple of videos. I was supposed to do one tomorrow, but it's snowing, so I'm not sure I'm going to make it down there to record that one. So we'll be recording a couple videos here in the next couple weeks. I've got some materials I'll be putting out. It's a big news coming. You'll be seeing this video a few days after we record it, and then the next weeks we'll have those other videos coming out to tell you our big news. So we want to kind of tease that just a little bit. But right now we're doing something that I've wanted to do here for the last number of weeks. Or last number of months, really. I stepped into our local library, as we seem to do. We're a homeschool family, so we pretty much, we spend a lot of time at the library combing through the shelves. I stopped in at the Shenandoah Public Library just down the road here, and on the shelf, in their main room, they apparently were having books on farming up there, and on the shelf was this particular title, and it's kind of shining in the light there. So, The Land Was Everything, by Victor Davis Hanson. And that name jumped out to me because I knew that name. Uh, the newspaper we subscribe to, he is a regular commentator on that. He's a regular contributor in opinion pieces on that. And I knew he was a farmer. I knew he managed um, fruit vineyard. That's that's the right thing. Grapes and other fruits and that sort of thing out in California. I knew that, but I never really read too much detail on his philosophy of farming. I knew he was a professor of classics. I knew he was a cultural commentator. In fact, I'm seeing on YouTube here advertisements from Hillsdale with him talking about the future of our nation and that sort of thing. So I've been seeing those ads on YouTube here lately. So he's a fairly well-known cultural conservative commentator, but he's also a farmer. And he's also a professor of classics. And so the intersection of all that made me want to dive into this book. And so before I'd even really start digging into it, I emailed a few Lyra supporters, some pastors I knew, and said, "Hey, anyone want to take a look at this book with me?" And so I've been working through it over the last couple of months, and Pastor Ian Kinney has been working through it. A good friend of Lyra, been out here a number of times helping us on various projects. Pastor Ian Kinney is also one of my students, and the main thing he learned from me was growing facial hair, but other things as well. You almost had a major in Maronde. You had most of my classes that I taught at the
I did.
seminary. So you are what, a year? Are you 2 years out now as a
Just
pastor?
barely 2 years out.
Barely 2 years out. He serves First Lutheran Church in Sabetha, Kansas. Sabetha, Kansas. Did I do that right?
Yep, that's it.
Yep. And it's a second year pastor out there, and you've done some writing, you've done some other projects and speaking and that sort of thing just in your first couple of years out, and a great supporter of Lyra. And I probably should let you just say a couple of words here, because I think that's good for people to hear. Pastor Kinney, what kind of farming stuff are you getting yourself into?
What kind of farming stuff am I getting myself into? We have we have a little plot of about 8 acres, a little outside of the town in which I serve. And on that 8 acres, we raise alfalfa, brome hay. This year, we're going to try a little bit of oats and wheat. Um, we've got a decent sized garden. Every year we try to up it just a little bit of one more one more thing we can have for the whole year. So we're kind of tacking those on every year, and then um, a number of kind of agricultural things like that. And then we also have we have just one meat cow. We do several pigs every year. This year we also added every Christmas we do a whole roast suckling pig. We've got about 40 laying hens, meat rabbits, and then we have geese, ducks, and every year we do We do a couple more meat chickens every year. So that's kind of what we've got going on.
And I think the reason I wanted you to highlight it because I think that's the perfect kind of example of what what we're hoping to inculcate in people through Lyra is
Mhm.
get yourself a couple acres or maybe even less than that and do something
Yeah.
start getting into the ground, start producing some of your own food. Certainly we also want to encourage ag entrepreneurs, those who are going to produce local food, but simply just having a bigger garden, raising a few animals, doing that sort of thing is going to be wonderful for your family and for you. And it's a good balance to
Mhm.
the kind of life that a pastor leads. So I
Yeah, and I always say my line of work doesn't provide me with calluses that a man needs, so I have to kind of procure those in another way. So it's a good way for that.
it's a better it helps you develop those calluses better than typing on a computer or sitting in a car.
That's right. That's right.
Which is what pastors do a lot of those sorts of things,
Yeah.
sedentary things. So I think it's very good for a pastor to get his hands
Hmm.
dirty. And that's wonderful. So and there are many more examples, really, in the Lutheran Church. Our church body, there's Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. There's a lot of guys who are doing that sort of thing, more than I ever expected, and I keep running into them. So that's been pretty cool. Okay, so we're gonna dig into this book. It's "The Land Was Everything: Letters from an American Farmer" by Victor Davis Hanson, and we'll get into kind of the classics connection because that's of course Lyra is not just about teaching agriculture, but also about the bequeathing the heritage of Western civilization, and that's certainly a connection that Dr. Hanson makes throughout his book. He also talks about rural and urban. He talks about the struggle of farming. He talks about it. It's in many ways. I don't want to give too much away before I let Pastor Ian kind of give his Pastor Kinney give his perspective on this. But I in some ways, especially the first half of the book, was kind of dark, and he certainly he has kind of a gallows humor about the entire farming enterprise, and my goal is to be a little bit more positive than he often is, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that. I would like to hear Pastor Kinney give me your first kind of broad brush impression of what Dr. Hanson had for us.
Yeah, I think if I were to put the book into one sentence, it would be that um, he illustrates, in real time over what we'd say maybe the last 200 years, the demise of the family farm. And he uses that as an allegory for the demise of the United States at large. Maybe Western Civ, I guess, but narrowly, he uses the demise of the family farm as an allegory for the demise of the United States. Now he breaks it up into three major categories, and within those categories, he breaks it up further. So he breaks it up into man versus nature, and then man versus other men, and then man versus himself. And within those three categories, he lists all these different ways that the family farm is attacked, and he doesn't always come out very broadly of like drawing out the allegory, but it's very clear that that's there. That I think is what he's getting at. That in each of those ways, those three ways, and then all the ways within it, whether it be nuisance or robbers or your own laziness or whatever, or not having children at all to take over the farm, stuff like that, is that he uses it an allegory and then kind of outlines it in those couple ways.
Yeah, and I think to me, one of the things based right off of what you just said that is intriguing to me is the paradox of it all. In that the farmer is the family farmer is the victim of his own success to a great extent, according to Dr. Hanson. So we produce food in abundance and greater and
Right,
greater and
right.
greater abundance, and then we end up with a satiated culture that doesn't want anything to do with the farmer. And once food produced perfectly in mass quantities in every season of the year. And that just is going to naturally squeeze out the little guy.
Right. One thing on that note that I was thinking about quite a bit, that I guess I allegorized his allegory about, was that when he speaks of that, that your success is your own worst enemy. I was thinking about it with Daniel's description of Nebuchadnezzar's dream a lot in the book. That he speaks of these several kingdoms that Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of, and the head is made of gold, and then the chest, the kind of breastplate chest is all silver, and then there's brass, and then the legs are iron, and then there's kind of like this wibbly wobbly alloy at the bottom. But to take what Daniel says and to apply it kind of like further out just from Nebuchadnezzar is that, that's kind of the downgrade of what happens in life, is that the golden head, decadence is great, but decadence will always lead to weakness, and then weakness will always lead to conflict, but then conflict will always lead to strength, and then strength will always lead back up to decadence. So I was thinking about with Daniel's statue, and that yeah, he outlines this in several different ways, but yeah, our progress, our industrialism, our decadence and wealth, it has in fact become our own worst enemy, both of the family farm and of Western civilization.
To me, it was fascinating to draw off that connection with Western civilization and democracy, so to speak. That for the Greeks and for the early Americans, and Thomas Jefferson in particular, an agrarian society was considered most conducive to freedom, most conducive to an actual, free society that could actually handle democracy. And we've moved so far away from it that I think he bemoans the demise of that the farm produces independent, free thinking people who are not easily cowed, not easily deceived. And we've inevitably, Greece lost it. We've inevitably lost it.
Mhm.
I read a different book years ago about essentially, and I need to find it again. I'm not sure. I don't even remember the title. I really need to track it down again. But it was essentially the tragedy of Thomas Jefferson. That he was a man who promoted the small family farm. The yeoman farmer was the foundation of his society, and yet he just couldn't get rid of slavery. And what does slavery encourage? Slavery encouraged huge industrialized production, squeeze out all the small farmers, chase them off to the Appalachians, all that sort of thing, a westward expansion, all that. And so we lost a lot when we lost the agrarians. Now, I think Dr. Hansen, he's so boldly realistic. He's like, do we even want this? Do the people who are buying, uh, people in the cities or even people in the country, do they really, really want this back? Do they really, really want small family farms? Because you're going to end up with food, like he says, he says it many times. He said food that's uh, what does he say? That's going to just be in season.
Beautiful, bland, tasteless, and can get across the country in minutes. Right.
Yes. And that's what people want, right? And a
Right.
small family farm can't compete on that level. That's just not what a farm to table local food operation is designed to do. Industrialized farming, for him, produces what people want. And he makes the argument, if you want to go
Mhm.
back to this yeoman, agrarian ideal, and I want to talk on the second half probably, about the myths of farming that he presents, because I found those really fascinating. But if you want to go back to that agrarian ideal, you're going to have to deal with smelly farmers. You have to deal with products, buying your fruit, not from the grocery store, but from a market. You're going to have to deal with those sorts of things, and people have that ideal in their mind. And he's questioning whether people have the wherewithal to actually deal with the consequences, or if they are so satiated by easy, cheap, pretty, but yet bland and nutritionally deficient food, are people going to be willing to make the changes um, to go back to something that they idealize? Um,
Yeah. 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 There's definitely a lot there. And what is Pastor Maronde? He's writing in 2003.
yes, yeah, it was a lot longer ago than I thought it
Okay.
was. Yeah,
So it's about 20 years ago.
yep,
And there's a lot of things that as more folks begin to maybe return ad fontes or get their fingers back in soil or kind of return to their kind of their you know um heritage of food. um we've learned a lot, and one of the phrases that I always find really profound is that one of the issues with our food right now is that we're what do we call it, starving ourselves stuffed, or stuffing ourselves starved,
yeah,
right? Where you can, this is why you can eat a whole bag of Doritos and not be full, right? But after a steak, a small steak, and a couple potatoes, you are, is because that food is nutrient dense, and the Doritos are just kind of orange colored cardboard, and it's not actually nutrient dense. Um, but the thing is that we like that, like, and it's offensive to hear that the food that you love and grew up with and had this nostalgia for is at least um, benign, if not malevolent, right? Definitely not positive. That's that's not what we like, and but we're still stuffing ourselves starved. So we've had some developments on that level since he wrote. Um, Another thing on what you said is, all this kind of circling back to do we want this, um, is that we insist upon the golden age of decadence without really still being willing to do the hard work of the bronze and the iron, to use Daniel's analogy, to still fight for it and maintain it. And so, someone there's a quote that the point of technological progress was so that man would have time and leisure to study the Word of God, and to pursue the growth of his soul and the betterment of his family. And all we've really seen is the exact opposite.
yes,
We're not only stuffed with starving, but we have so many different appliances that make life so much easier. Somehow we're busier, and somehow we have less time than generations that have. I mean, busyness is like a virtue. We have so much of it. So, and then there's a case of if people want it. One of the things he says that's really insightful is that all the things that just don't have value, I mean, that we like, we enjoy, but don't have value, that we could live without and be probably more happy without, we spend just oodles of money on. But that when, he farmers break their backs to put food on tables, we insist that it has to be immaculate, but we want to pay absolutely as little as possible for it. I found that very insightful, that the thing, and then we actually cannot live without daily bread. Like, we cannot live without this thing, and that God has even written that into the laws of creation before the fall. Um, and so I found that insightful, that we insist that it has to be immaculate, and of course, if it's beautiful, it's maybe not going to be as flavorful or nutritious. But we want to pay as little as possible for it.
yeah. And just on a very practical level, as you said, things have changed in the last 20 years. So is quote unquote organic or natural food quite as expensive as it was back in his day? No, not quite. I mean, it's still more expensive, but
Right.
the availability
Right.
is better. The quality is probably better too, because he
Mhm.
talks about uh, you know uh, food that's grown without the heavy chemicals is going to look terrible. Well, it's not quite the case
Mhm.
anymore. We've been able to use technology to
Right.
produce good looking stuff that is also not hasn't been sprayed. however many times.
Yeah.
So we've made some advances on that. I think his general points are still very much accurate, but or very much worth taking. Real quick here before we conclude this part of the show, this first segment, the connection with democracy. I mentioned that before, and I think that is kind of, you said it's an allegory. The farming as an allegory for society, and I think his argument would be that that's how the Greeks saw. The
Mhm.
farmer, and the life of the agrarian was as a metaphor for society. So his argument would be if we lose the farmer, and especially the family farmer, but if we lose the farmer, we have lost something essential to democracy. Now you and I as pastors, we have much bigger fish to fry than quote unquote democracy, but it is still an important question for our society. Um, does the revitalization of rural America matter? He would argue that it matters quite a bit. It matters a great deal to our
Mhm.
society. Um, I wonder, um, here as we conclude this first half, what your thought would be. Okay, so he makes the argument, it's a strong argument, that in order for democracy to survive, for our system of government to survive, you need farmers. You need farmers, and we're
Mhm.
losing them, and that's maybe part of the issue. What about the church? What you serve amongst rural people, I serve amongst rural people. What does the church lose when little towns dry up, when all the kids go off to Omaha or Kansas City?
Mhm.
What does the church lose? Is it just simply us kind of guarding our own kingdoms? Like, well, we were having churches close, and that church was there forever, or is there something more?
So when it comes to democracy, when it comes to landowning, farmers, uh, whatever the word might be, homesteaders or family farmers, being an allegory for freedom is that if you have the capacity to protect and provide and preside over your family as a father is given to do, you are not enslaved to any man. And so this is from what I mean. He brings up antiquity a lot, which I have some kind of not qualms with it, but we could talk about that later, I guess. But he brings up antiquity a lot, and so I understand that. Um, I understand in the Roman Empire, we would keep, we would be sure to keep our generals um, out of our agricultural lands. I understand we would keep them north. We wouldn't have them south where we grow all the food because the idea within the emperor's minds was that if and when the general revolts, right, and raises his own army and tries to have an insurrection, if he is away from the production of food and the agriculture, it will be much harder for him. So he is still subject to his governing authority. But the concern was that if he was south around and he could take over the production of food, then he would have much more authority to be free. And so the allegory with democracy is kind of that, is that you are free to provide for your own, and you're not enslaved to any man if you are doing that. When it comes to the church, what does the church lose? I think I think you can't swing a cat in a rural community without finding a congregation that has been touched by this. Being convinced that children are optional and bad, and not inculcating in them to remain in the broad household and the community, and so they take off. And I mean, our congregations in our area just have lineages back to Germany, where you read through these records, and it's we had 14 kids, and then our children each had 12 kids, and then 10 kids, and it's eight. And now the few children that we do have, um, there's this desire for city life and non-agricultural life. And so what happens is that, the church cannot be dour, which is one of my problems with the book, but the church, I mean, we've already won. Like, there's only optimism. It is only, all things are only for the good. And so there's no losing here. But the frustration of, while the church cannot fail, obviously parishes die and churches close, and we just run flat out of people. And so the effect on the church in this matter is that the church militant um, shrinks a little bit, and we do not have these massive intergenerational family ties, um, just a little bit because people are not tied to their land and their family farm as much, and we do lose them to Kansas City and Omaha, which then divorces them from their family, from their extended family, from their congregational family, and from the land in which their family farms. So, one of my concerns we can talk about later is solutions. I don't have a solution for that, but I think that is a big problem that we have seen. I don't know, probably at least in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Of this exodus, at least of the younger generations, for something that they were told had value in the cities that couldn't be provided them around the word and sacrament ministry of a church, and around love and protection of a family. But it is a problem for congregations within the one holy Christian church, that we do see a dwindling of the church militant, when family farms go down. So I'm in the northeast corner of Kansas, and when I try to ride combines with my farmers every year as they harvest, and they'll kind of walk me through there used to be a house there. There was a homestead there. There was a 60 acre there. There was a 120 acre there. Those folks were big time, right? They were running 120 acres, and it just, little by little, it just kind of, people went away, so it went away. And churches that used to be just standing room only are across the country, not even to mention Western Civ, but across the country, at least the size of the families within the congregation is smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder how much spiritual impoverishment in the congregation. I didn't quite put that the right way. When the families get smaller, the connection, the land, we lose that. People dart off here, there, and everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
How often does that then weaken the spiritual ties between members of a family, or the quote unquote ancestral church? And we all can make jokes about the ancestral church, where they're very entrenched, and you've got so much history on everything from the color of the carpet to to things that matter a lot more. But a church where you have intergenerational representation, where people are staying, I would think would mean that you have more people staying in the faith. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
I've no
for what you have
statistics to back
I
it
mean,
up.
when you are um, when you're a nomad, right? When you're a spiritual nomad, or just a land nomad, or familial nomad, like when you're just a wanderer, or a mercenary, you have nothing to fight for or protect, and it's a total distancing, right? That when the onslaught of modernity comes for the culture, and then turns its ugly head on the church. I know Jesus and I know Paul, but who are you? And seeks to attack the church. If you have nothing to protect, once again, you're kind of enslaved again. You have nothing to fight for, nothing to protect. You have. I mean, again, we're getting very dour here, but that's a concern, is that if you have nothing to fight for or protect, well, that's kind of its own conclusion. You have nothing to fight for or protect, and you're just nomadic, and you're not tied to anything. So a lot of these things, I think we could clearly see, are connected to the church. And again, we can't actually lose, because it's already over, and it's only for the good. But in the suffering time of the church militant, we do see this taking a toll.
Yeah, I'm always reminded of, I believe it was Dr. Gibbs at St. Louis once said, "We've read the end of the book and we win." And
Yeah,
so
right.
there
Yeah, we
there
just read the last chapter first. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, we have, and I on the other side, I want to talk a little bit about your critiques here, because you do critique, and I mentioned at the very beginning how dark and dour this is, and I have no idea what Dr. Hanson's own theological or background, or does
I
he
have
does
some pretty high indications, I think, from what he
Okay.
said.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know any direct evidence as far as what he claims as far as allegiance to a church or to Christianity. But yes, very dour picture, and we'll talk about that on the other end as we get back. So I'm with Pastor Ian Kinney of First Lutheran Church, Sabetha, Kansas. Very glad to have him with us today. We're talking about the church, the book, The Land Was Everything, Letters from American Farmer, from classical professor and farmer Victor Davis Hanson. Please join us on part 2. Have a wonderful day. God's blessings.